Hello, everybody. Data valuation is a really important topic. This is an underleveraged skill for data practitioners. So I made this presentation just solely out of my personal interest in it and the fact that more people would benefit from learning how to think about this topic and implement it in the workplace. If you're curious to read more, the book that I'm going to recommend is called Infonomics. It's by Doug Laney. He's actually the inventor of the term infonomics. And he's also the inventor of the original 3 V's of big data. Doug's really a good person in terms of being an original source of excellent information. I encourage you to check out his work, give him a follow on LinkedIn, all that good stuff. Today, we will be using a fictional case study to illustrate the concepts around this topic of data valuation. I'm hoping that at the end of this presentation, you guys can have some actionable strategies to take back to your companies and conduct data valuation exercises around your data resources. I just want to emphasize the strategies presented here. These can be thought of as thought experiments, if you will. I just don't want people to feel very pressured, like, oh, this is so academic. There's all of these really specific things that I have to be doing. It's more just like, how do I set up some experiments? How do I create some different valuation methods that get us closer to developing prioritization of data resources and data related work? So that's the goal for our talk today. It is going to be a fictional case study. So let me jump into that. So Aiden and Bailey are members of the Data Governance Program Office at Green Cup Company, one of the world's top suppliers of green plastic drinking vessels. Aiden and Bailey are data people, which means they agree on the benefits of data governance. So just to name a few, those include enabling the use of data as a single source of truth for business decision-making, providing insight into data quality, and allowing for information sharing across the business. There's a real crisis of data literacy within the business, says Aiden. They don't understand that data governance is priceless. Bailey, on the other hand, is not so sure. They wonder if putting a price on data governance might help to increase buy-in across the organization. In their exploration of this topic, Bailey will come to discover that value is in fact in the eye of the beholder. Across the organization, everybody has a slightly different picture of what constitutes value. In their interactions with different business people, Bailey finds that they have an entirely different idea of what makes data valuable, which includes improving the productivity of teammates, reducing the time spent on data-related tasks, and complying with perhaps what is perceived as burdensome regulatory requirements, getting in the way of getting the job done. Both sides of the business are focused on making and selling the best green cup possible. They just have very different ideas of the role of data in achieving that objective. Bailey knew that they would need to better understand concepts related to data valuation before they learned about existing approaches and then developed an implementation strategy for Green Cup Co. So let's start by talking about the concepts. Bailey was sure that the data of Green Cup Co. had value, although they were finding it difficult to determine exactly how much value. It was challenging to put a specific number to a single data set, much less the entire data governance program. In Bailey's experience, data has both a contextual and a temporal component to its value. The unique characteristics of data as an asset stood in the way of Bailey's ability to quickly evaluate its monetary value. Bailey was not sure if it would be possible to develop a methodology that would allow for comparison between data sets or across business units. Bailey was concerned about their ability to find a data evaluation method upon which all stakeholders would agree. Bailey considered that they might want to start off their data evaluation endeavor by creating a list of benefit and cost categories that could be consistently referenced in their discussions with stakeholders. So previously we considered the benefits associated with data, and now we're going to talk about the costs. So costs include data collection, data acquisition, the cost associated with data storage, cost of potential risks, as well as risk mitigation strategies, and the cost of data-related business functions, tools, and applications. Bailey also set aside some time to think about ways they might be able to quantify the data at Green Cup Co. So they jotted down some back of the napkin strategies, which included identifying opportunities such as improvements to decision making or income gained from delivering more value to customers, selling the data, or the value if Green Cup Co. packaged their data or the insights from data and sold it to interested third parties, market value, or the value the data might add to the selling price as an intangible asset at the time of a merger or acquisition, replacement cost, or the cost if the data was lost in a disaster, and also risk costs, which are the costs associated with any penalties, remediation, or litigation fees related to a regulatory violation or a breach. After jotting down these ideas, Bailey then felt ready to jump into the ideas of others. So now we're going to jump into some documented approaches, specifically outlining 3 categories of data evaluation strategies. So the main challenge here is that there is no standard formal approach to data evaluation. Research published in the Harvard Data Science Review has considered many different studies estimating data's value. They found that no standard approach existed, and moreover, the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation updated International Accounting Standard 38 to state that data cannot be capitalized on an auditable financial statement. The unique attributes of data, such as the contextual and the temporal elements inherent to its potential value, get in the way of standard value assessment methodologies. That being said, valuing data is difficult because outside of its intended context, it may be useless. However, placing the right information through the right channel to the right persons at the right time can be priceless. Bailey was hopeful that data evaluation would be the key to improving data-related decision-making, increasing stakeholder buy-in, and justifying the investment in the Data Governance Program Office and in the organization's data management capabilities more broadly. Discouraged, but not dissuaded, Bailey got back into reading the HDSR survey paper, which detailed 3 primary approaches to data evaluation. That's what we're going to talk about next. So, market-based methods are specifically focused on the impact of data on income, cost, or stock value of a company. The market-based strategy involves assessment in the case of buying or selling data, assessing the value of acquiring or investing in a data-rich organization, and calculating the opportunity cost of making decisions when data is missing. So market-based models are best suited to calculating the value of data in the marketplace. In other words, the value of data in terms of net profit. Some great use cases for the market-based strategy is in situations where you might be deciding to acquire a competitor or if you're calculating the cost of a data breach. However, market-based models do not account for the usefulness of data to the organization outside of that quantified, realized value. So it's really all about that realized monetary value of a data asset. Okay, so let's do an example. Bailey realized that a recent Green Cup Co. acquisition provided the opportunity to use the market-based data evaluation strategy. A year previously, Green Cup Co. had purchased a small direct-to-consumer brand called Mugs Unlimited, which had a lot of valuable data about Green Cup Co.'s target customers. The value of Mugs Unlimited customer data played a significant role in Green Cup Co.'s decision to pay more than the book value to acquire Mugs Unlimited. The difference between the selling price and the value on Mugs Unlimited balance sheets gave Bailey a starting place. It was a good way to quantify that value of that customer data that was gained in the acquisition. Moreover, Green Cup Co. was then able to use the customer data to negotiate with their retailers, improve marketing, and launch their own D2C platform. The realized value of these new initiatives then further informed Bailey's ability to calculate the market-based value of Mugs Unlimited's data. It's super difficult to execute data evaluation, but it's nice to think about. It's a good strategy and potentially very useful for communicating. Just like you put numbers on your resume, it's a good idea to attach numbers to your work. While you're in the job, why not also try to think about the value that you're adding? So the next strategy that we're going to talk about is called the economic strategy. And this is focused on calculating the value of data in terms of its contributions to economic development and just generally promoting the public good. So here's an example. As an employee of a large public company, Bailey wasn't sure how the economic valuation methods were going to be applicable to their work. However, while on a walk with a local park with a friend, Bailey learned about the role of big data in park planning. So there is actually a real organization called the National Recreation and Parks Association, NRPA. They use data-driven benchmarking to inform the process of planning and assessing where parks need to go, and also which existing parks need to be improved, enhanced, and renovated. So they have a tool called Park Metrics. And this benchmarking methodology contributed to the more than 201 billion US dollars in economic activity that was associated with local parks and recreation in the United States in the year 2021. That's what we're using to base this data on. So that's our monetary value. And then working backwards from that figure, you could specifically calculate the value generated by the Park Metrics benchmarking tool. That would be an example of a economic data valuation strategy in action. It is mainly useful for your public and your quasi-public entities. Now, the final strategy is the dimensional approach. This one takes into account the intrinsic characteristics of a data set to inform the estimate of value. It's a very helpful method for comparing data sets either internally or just justifying the investment on data-related projects. The dimensional approach takes into account data's quality, timeliness, replacement cost, popularity, and contribution towards regulatory compliance. So I'm going to do a deep dive on data quality because this is something that gets talked about a lot. Data quality, of course, plays an important role in determining the value of data. However, it is important to note that we shouldn't be talking about data in terms of black and white, like low quality versus high quality. We all understand that data quality is on a spectrum, but I think there needs to be more conversation about project-specific data quality and just viewing a data set as fit for purpose and making that the central focus of evaluation. So when we say garbage in, garbage out, that's overly simplistic and potentially detrimental. I don't feel like other fields talk about raw materials in the same way that some data practitioners are dismissive of the potential value of resources if they're perceived to be non-optimal. It's all about fit for purpose. So for Bailey's organization, the question then becomes, even if the data lacks the standard characteristics of data quality, could it still be useful for the objective of creating and selling green cups? So the first strategy is market-based. This one has its merits, certainly. It's easy to communicate. It's easy for everyone to understand because it's based on real numbers, actual monetary values. But it does rely on the whims of the market. The market for data is highly illiquid, and that can lead to pressures around pricing. And it's just not a great way to figure out the value of data for an internal project necessarily. Now, the economic approach is a better fit for an organization that is a public or a quasi-public entity. So that leaves the dimensional set of strategies. This is a balanced way to gain a better understanding of the costs and benefits of data for the purposes of prioritizing investment and figuring out how to consider the value of data within Green Cup Co. Again, dimensional takes into account relevance, timeliness, quality, and other aspects, intrinsic qualities of data, looking at how useful the data is potentially in order to assign a dollar value or some other quantified metric to a data set. Any questions about these three strategies? And does anybody have anything that they want to share?
Hi, Nicole. This is Sid. My first question is, you relayed three different ways to value the data, the market-based, economic, and the dimensional approach. I'm guessing those are three different complete approaches. So you don't additively put all those things together and then come up with the total. You would more like average those three different approaches to come
Mhm.
up with the value.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The overlap areas represent an average. These are thought experiments. It's a little bit more squishy than having set formulas. So, just to emphasize about your question, these strategies can certainly be used in combination, and that it is absolutely encouraged. If you can find a way to value data through the market and connect that with potential value, scarcity, other aspects of usefulness, then that's going to lead to a much stronger and more robust estimate. And yes, it would be like a blending of the different strategies rather than an additive approach. So, yes, that is a good way to think about it.
Perfect. If I may throw in another question.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Timeliness needs to be included with data quality. I don't really care about the quality of the data if it's not timely. The definition of timely, maybe that's the current thing. If I don't have current data, then there's no reason to try to evaluate the other data quality dimensions. But perhaps there might be a different dimension of timeliness that you're trying to include in there.
Timeliness is so crucial. There is an aspect of that which is currency. That's just how you might say like currentness of the data, like how recency. In the DMBOK, they do talk about in the data quality chapter several different sets of data quality characteristics, and that's in chapter 13. There's several tables here. And definitely timeliness, currency, these are important aspects of data quality. I like to grab the physical book. Now that I've done the test, it feels good actually to have the book. And I also have a digital copy, which is what I recommend. It's a big book. Yes, that is indeed the case. And definitely encourage folks who don't have the DMBOK to go pick up a copy, even if you aren't interested in the certification that's associated. It is a really helpful book as a reference. This is actually the last section. This is where we're going to talk about implementation. I'm not a consultant. I've read the Infonomics book by Doug Laney. Doug is indeed the expert on this and does data monetization strategy and implementation for a living. So, from an academic perspective, I'm going to talk now about how a fictional character working for a green cup company is going to implement these strategies that we talked about in the previous section. All right, so Bailey understands that a good next step is to quantify the popularity of different data sets across initiatives across the organization. Bailey also considered the importance of connecting information assets to specific business outcomes, starting with the organization's mission of becoming the world's leading supplier of green plastic drinking vessels. Rather than try to determine the value of a specific data set, Bailey followed the advice set forward in Infonomics to group data sets into portfolios of related information. So for Green Cup Co., this could mean grouping data sets into customer data, product data, employee data, supplier data, etc. Then, taking into account the popularity and the potential business impact of those portfolios, Bailey created a ranked list of the data assets. For each of the top data assets at Green Cup Co., Bailey then used dimensional valuation approaches to estimate the gap between realized, probable, and potential value of that asset. Bailey also thought about processes that they might implement to track the value of data over time. So, Doug Laney tells us that organizations that take seriously the notion of information as a corporate asset should engage in the same quality assessment discipline as with their traditional physical and financial assets. Just as other assets are periodically inventoried or audited, information assets should be appraised periodically for improvements or degradation. Ultimately, Bailey's analysis was fruitful in quantifying ways that data played a role in improving manufacturing efficiency, contributing to the success of the new go to market platform, and better understanding retailers and customers in order to create more finely tuned marketing approaches. With new tools and a better grasp of the potential implications of data valuation, Bailey again returned to the idea that they would need many different strategies to convince stakeholders of the value of data governance. They understood that value is in the eye of the beholder, and they knew they would need different ways to assess and explain the benefits and costs associated with data. Bailey hoped that by undertaking a data valuation initiative, they would be able to improve decision making related to data, such as the prioritization of assets, increase stakeholder buy in, and justify the appropriate level of investment in the data governance program office. Bailey also realized that Green Cup Co. might be able to capitalize on the value of data through relationships with its suppliers and partners. As Doug Laney explains in Infonomics, sometimes the mere act of putting a cost or market value on an information asset leads to the realization that it can and should be monetized in a variety of ways. For years, Green Cup Co. had been giving away data to their suppliers about the purchasing habits of Green Cup Co.'s customers. Moving forward, Bailey wondered if perhaps Green Cup Co. might be able to monetize this information via either a direct sale or by using it to negotiate preferred pricing with their suppliers. Bailey also hoped that the new focus on data valuation would lead to the prioritization of efforts that would ultimately benefit the customer. For example, Bailey wondered if it would be feasible to develop a new loyalty program, a recommendation engine, or perhaps a predictive analytics toolset that could allow Green Cup Co. to better serve its customer base of adoring fans. Bailey also crafted this list of places to look for data's contribution to value across the business. I might run through some examples here. And again, all of these are drawn from Infonomics and also the other book, Data Juice, by the same author. So, the first strategy is looking at how data contributes to customer acquisition. There's a fun story about how Georgia Aquarium in my local state of Georgia used data to identify the right customer for their marketing efforts and then boosted attendance at the aquarium. Next strategy is improving customer retention. If you order a package on FedEx, they're using all this data science on the back end in order to make shipping more efficient and also provide data about the shipping process to the customer. And that results in more timely deliveries and also better customer awareness of the status of their order. Overall, this has helped increase retention among FedEx customers. Okay, next one is entering a new market. So the example here is Waze. It's like a GPS app that provides enriched transport data to drivers. And when they were entering Brazil, which was their first market in South America, they actually bartered with another company to obtain the mapping data that allowed them to successfully enter this new market. Next is enabling competitive differentiation. So, example is this bank called Westpac, which had a company initiative called Know Me. This improved their understanding of their customer by creating a unified customer entity, essentially improving their master data that they had about the customer across the customer's website browsing history, as well as their usage of ATMs, call center interactions, etc. And this allowed them to better serve their customers. Creating a supplemental revenue stream or introducing a new line of business. So, when you go to a grocery store and you have that loyalty card that you swipe to get 4 cents off your milk, you are generating data that the grocer then monetizes as a revenue stream. In fact, Kroger netted an estimated $10 million annually, specifically the sale of the data associated with the customer loyalty program. So you might get 4 cents off your milk, but in aggregate, Kroger is packaging all of that data and selling it for hundreds of millions of dollars. So good for Kroger. Next one is bartering for goods and services. There's kind of two data monetization approaches. You can either sell your data or you can trade your data. It's actually better to trade your data. And the reason why is that there's no tax hit to the company if you're bartering your data for goods, services, information, etc. So working out a barter exchange is actually the tax advantage approach. The example here is a specialty grocer called Abe's, and they enabled what Doug calls a win-win-win by providing customer feedback to the suppliers in exchange for discounted or free products from the suppliers delivered to the grocer. So essentially, the customers get ultimately better products because they have the opportunity to deliver feedback to the grocer and have that communicated back to the manufacturers and the suppliers. And the grocer benefits from getting free stuff that then they can turn around and sell. Abe's also did the supplemental revenue stream thing where they were directly monetizing their data. They actually aggregated and summarized information that they were getting. They were specifically like a healthy food retailer. So then they packaged their healthy food insights, essentially the analytics from their customer data, and then they sold that to major food conglomerates. So they were doing multiple kinds of data monetization approaches here. Okay, number 7 is decreasing maintenance costs. So the more data you have, the better you can do predictive maintenance. An example here is DBS Bank, and they are in Singapore. They were identifying when ATM stockouts were taking place, and then they were taking proactive action by restocking the ATMs before they ran out. They were finding the optimal times based on when customer usage was lower so that they were doing less to disrupt the usage of the ATMs. Number 8, I love this one, identifying fraud and reducing risks. So in New York City, the Office of Policy and Strategic Planning used data to detect illegal grease dumping that was clogging the sewers so that they could leverage fines against restaurants that were dumping their grease in the sewer, which is illegal. Next one is supporting regulatory compliance. It actually has an impact on the business bottom lines. So we should all be engaging in regulatory compliance and also giving ourselves a pat on the back for the value that data contributes through complying with rules and industry standards. Well, the example here is Citigroup, which is a bank. They used 2,600 macroeconomic factors that enabled better risk modeling. So, when they passed the US Federal Reserve's Comprehensive Capital Analysis and Review stress test, which is abbreviated CCAR, this is apparently a test that the Fed does every year. And in 2015, they got the best score. That resulted in an increase in their market capitalization of $9 billion because they had the best model, so they were able to do the best risk planning. Last one is the value of data for increasing the customer experience. My example here, I have 2 actually. So the first one is Walmart Polaris Semantic Search Engine. We all know semantic search. Hopefully, we understand that we should be using semantic modeling to understand not just the text that's being entered, but what that text is, the intended meaning. But what Walmart did that was really cool as an extra step, they were actually connecting their semantic search to web trends. So, for example, they noticed there was a increase in searches for the text house at a specific time. And because they had this search engine that had semantic modeling plus the trending social media topics, then they knew that people were searching for the House DVD set because the House TV series had just ended. So they were able to serve the correct results to the customers that wanted to watch House. So that's one example. And then the other example is Dollar General used population data. They used specifically data about when people were entering their stores and when they were purchasing, and they saw that there was this noticeable increase in demand right before they closed. Then they were like, oh, we need to stay open later. So they spread out that demand across more hours. They were open when other similar retailers were closed, and they were able to better meet customer demand and increase sales. So, those are some cool examples of some really obvious places to go look for the connection of data to business outcomes. Returning to our case study here, putting a price on Green Cup Co.'s formerly priceless data governance efforts, Bailey believed they were moving the company towards a more sustainable, data oriented future. Data's value can and should be quantified. And doing so can help justify the appropriate level of investment in data governance. Do you guys have any questions about what we covered so far?
I think Nicole is spot on.
Thank you.
Again, spot on. A word that really resonated with me and my company is portfolio that you said, trying to categorize your enterprise's data into portfolios. That's actually what we have moved towards in our own enterprise. That is so key, is trying to categorize and organize first, and then you can evaluate at that next point. I really appreciate what you have said so far today, and I'm sure other folks are doing the same.
I really appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate hearing that you're using the data domains or data portfolio strategy at your company. That's great to hear.
Right, cool. Hi, everyone. Well, my question is about all aspects or all attributes that we need to consider in the
Mhm.
value quantification and in some projects or programs, depending of the size of the companies. Because in my experience, I see that the value is subjective for different people. Well, depending of the responsibility of the context on the impacts and the financial impacts for the different organizations. In some situations, the value of data is calculated depending on the cost of the initiatives that activate that data and offers a solution for the business directly apporting to the budget, economic income to the companies, or optimizations or saving money in different activities. So I think that we can build a different formulas or techniques to calculate that value according to
Yeah,
different contexts. Thank you very much.
thank you. Yes, that was an excellent point. The value of data is indeed subjective, and that's why multiple approaches are very useful. Different stakeholders see the data from different perspectives. It's less informational, but just the one with the parable of the blind men and the elephant. Each stakeholder sees a different part of the elephant. That's why different approaches are so helpful because data, of course, is highly subjective. It's like abstractions on top of abstractions. Gosh, Doug is really great. In infonomics, they go through these different formulas, as you said. And so each of the 6 strategies that are discussed has an associated formula in it. If you read the book, you'll see all the different ways that you can really approach the dimensional modeling of data evaluation.
Hi, this is Zara. So I was just asking about your take on AI and the need of data and how can that actually enable or help on data monetization and value realization and maybe even emphasize on the need of data governance? Can it be used or does it fall in one of the models that you have just mentioned before?
Good question. So AI is nothing new. AI started in the 1950s when we had better techniques for leveraging larger amounts of data, producing better statistical models, etc. This current hype cycle that we're in, specifically dating back to the release of ChatGPT and everyone realizing, like, wow, generative pre trained transformers, that really works. That's a very effective architecture. It's just increased the excitement for machine learning, but it's really just like a continuation of these overall increases in capability when it comes to applied statistics. You can definitely use any of these approaches when we're talking about AI. It's all hype at the end of the day. Right now, the hype is very high, but AI doesn't really require any kind of different approach. It has had the effect of the fact that we're in this hype cycle. It has shown a light on the value of data management and the benefits that data practitioners bring to the organization. It does give the profession some of the luster that it deserves. So now is a great time to tell your friends to go become data management practitioners and learn how to do data evaluation so that their company can capitalize on the value of data assets. Machine learning is getting better every year. It doesn't really change the importance of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Generative AI is a subset of overall machine learning, and it has gotten really good lately, which is exciting. It's great. I'm glad people care. I'm glad people are looking at data now and considering it with the importance that it deserves. Been an excellent audience. Jesus, do you want to come off mute and read your comment as well? So he says AI is just a tool to compute information like our brains. Information or data for this is very important according to attributes like quality, velocity, privacy, etc. And the purpose is important. Just another thought on that topic. Regardless of what the end product looks like, whether it's just using data to inform decision making in the boardroom or whether we're creating some more complex machine learning product, if we can figure out how to quantify that, prioritize it, figure out how to monetize our data, that's where we're going with what we learned today. So thank you guys so much for your time and attention. This has been really fun. Well, y'all have been a great group.